Good afternoon. I want to welcome you to the third in our series of speakers on behalf of the Berkeley Initiative for Mindfulness in Law. As you all know, we're here together to sit with Jack Kornfield this afternoon. His topic is the case for mindfulness and wisdom in law. And we will not only talk about this, but Jack is going to lead us through some experiential exercises, some actual meditative practices, which will help make these subjects real. Someone said to me that she wasn't sure she could make Jack's lecture. And I said, well, it's not exactly a lecture, you know. Jack is going to invite us to enter some experiential spaces with him, some contemplative and reflective spaces together, and that's what we're here to do today. Which leads me to a reminder I want to make, and that is to turn off your cell phones. I'm sure there are many people here who are carrying, and I want to encourage you to turn those off. And I urge this not only to protect the people sitting around you from disturbance, but to protect yourselves from disturbance. It becomes a symbolic way for each of us to say, I'm going to cut off for the next hour and a half or so from the world outside, and I'm going to be fully present here in this room with Jack Kornfield and the group that has gathered here to be with us. Jack is, in my experience, one of the true master teachers, not only in the field of mindfulness, but in the various disciplines which I've studied. I was recently asked by a classmate of mine at Yale Law School, who were the people, the really influential teachers in my life, people who had had an impact on my life. And one of the names that immediately came to mind was Jack's, and John Kabat-Zinn as well, for those of you who were here 2 weeks ago, or who know his work. And what was striking to me as I reflected on the teachers who have really impacted my life is that there were no names from my 4 years at Harvard or my 3 years at Yale. I was really taken aback by that sudden discovery. And it's not that I haven't had important and influential teachers. It just happens that they were not at either of those two institutions. This may be repetition for some of you, but I wanted to say a little bit about the context which brings us here to talk about mindfulness in law today. Because for some people, still, the idea of mindfulness in law is, well, what's the connection? Although that question is less frequently asked today than it was, say, 24 years ago. When I was just starting the Center for Law and Social Policy, a public interest law firm in Washington, D.C., which coincidentally was the very time when Jack was living as a Buddhist monk in Thailand and absorbing some of the wisdom that he'll share with us today. At that time, if someone had asked me about my interest in meditation, I would have said, what? And if someone had suggested to me that meditation could make me a more effective lawyer and my commitment to public interest law a more sustainable commitment to hold on to over time, I would have said that doesn't seem realistic to me. What's that all about? So and I think that's kind of where the culture was at that time. Jack tells a wonderful story about coming back in 1972 to a country in which he felt quite foreign after spending 5 years in Thailand. And he wrote in one of his books, "It became clear that I would have to find a way to reconcile the ancient and wonderful teachings I had received at the Buddhist monastery with the ways of our modern world. Over the years," he says, "this reconciliation has become one of the most interesting and compelling inquiries for me." And I just want to say that we are all beneficiaries of that effort at reconciliation, because that really has created the context from which the Berkeley Initiative for Mindfulness in Law has grown over time. As many of you know, for the last 2 decades, there have been meditation retreats for law students and lawyers, the first held in Connecticut for Yale law students and faculty. We have had annual retreats at the Spirit Rock Meditation Center in Marin County, of which Jack was a founder. At this law school, we've had since 2009 a seminar called Effective and Sustainable Law Practice, the Meditative Perspective. And that seminar has drawn a very large number of students, and their response has been extremely enthusiastic and encouraging, and helped us to create the Berkeley Initiative for Mindfulness in Law. This was created by Dean Edley in 2011, and he has become an unwavering supporter of the Mindfulness in Law initiative, in part because the seminar has met with so much enthusiasm, and in part because of the Berkeley Mindful Lawyer Conference in 2010, which drew almost 200 lawyers from all over the country to talk about how mindfulness was critical to their sense of things. That conference, incidentally, led to a symposium in the Journal of Legal Education. I just got the final proofs from the editor of the Journal of Legal Education, which is the law review put out by the Association of American Law Schools. And that symposium will come out in May, called The Mindful Lawyer, and based on papers that were presented here at Berkeley in the fall of 2010. And the next conference is planned for June 2013. We don't have a date, so you can't put it in your calendars yet, but probably your calendars are not yet full for that month. I hope not. I think I've probably said enough by way of introduction of Jack Kornfield. He is one of the inspiring teachers in my life, and not only because of the depth of his wisdom, but because of his skill as a teacher. It's been an inspiration to me and a challenge to, and I could aspire to be such a teacher someday. I recommend to you, those of you who are intrigued by our session today, I urge you to take a look at one of his books. They're an elegant introduction and exploration of the depths of what mindfulness practice can be as it's brought to bear in the world of practical affairs. So with that much introduction to the Berkeley Initiative and to Jack Kornfield, I turn the platform over to you, my dear friend.
Thank you, Charlie. Thank you so much. So happy Leap Day to you. I'm sure you know of the old Irish tradition that on Leap Day, young women are allowed to propose to young men, and I think the young men have to accept. So you could bear that in mind should it be of interest to you. I'm also really happy to be part of the whole movement of mindfulness in law that Charlie has described, and to be here at the law school. And also, there's a very personal happiness in that my daughter Caroline, who's sitting over in the corner, is a 3L here. So she's almost made it through. And that's very special. And so Charlie said I have something like an hour and a half, maybe a little bit less, we'll see. And I'd like to talk to you first for a bit, and then, as he said, to do some trainings. One of the first things that would help me is to know how many of you have already an established mindfulness or meditation practice. Okay. How many of you are relatively new to meditation? A few virgins, even at the law school. Great. That's good. How many of you are faculty here or somewhere? A few. Great. Wonderful. How many of you are students at Bolt? Terrific. Let's see, what else might I ask? How many of you are practicing lawyers? Some. How many defendants? No, it's okay. All right. So we'll talk a little bit about, as Charlie had asked, the case for wisdom. And my experience perhaps mirroring a little bit what he said about the teachers that were important, is that I had what was considered a good quality Ivy League education at Dartmouth College and studied, math and science and history and the various liberal arts and so forth. But at the same time, I also came from a family where I had a brilliant scientist father who was also abusive and violent, and in certain ways kind of mentally ill. And so there was a lot of suffering in my life as well as there was creativity. And when I graduated from Dartmouth in the 1960s, I'd thought at one point to go into science or medicine, but then I started to take some courses in Asian studies and Buddhism, which I ended up majoring in, and I realized that there was a whole dimension of learning that was absent in the Ivy League education that I was being provided. And I ended up going, as Charlie said, into a monastery in Thailand to get training in Buddhist psychology and practices and so forth. And it was there that I learned and had trainings in mindfulness and ways to calm myself, in compassion and forgiveness, in dealing with the anger that I thought was in my father, but, big surprise, discovered that I also carried and had kind of squashed down because I didn't want to be like him, but I didn't know what to do with it. How to deal with emotions, how to deal with trauma, practices of loving kindness, and maybe most important, the understanding that what we seek in our life and what satisfies us is not so much the outer things, but the state of our heart. Do we love well? Are we connected? Can we bring our gifts to life? And that's what actually brings human satisfaction. And Charlie and I had this experience some years ago. I got a call from one of the senior professors and then an assistant dean over at Stanford Business School, and they asked if I would come down and lead a seminar for the entire student body on mindfulness and compassion and so forth. And I said, why are you interested? He said, well, we get very accomplished students who come in and we're sort of the vetting agency for the corporations. Once they get through, then they get their jobs. And they come in and they're already, very, very active and, full of what they're going to do in the world, but also kind of lost in that. And as the 2 years go on, more and more they're envisioning their jobs and the money they'll get and all the things they'll do, and they lose themselves. And by the end of the 2 years at the law school, they're less in touch with themselves than human beings should be, and then they were and they came, and we're worried about them. And I said, so if I'm understanding you right, basically what you're asking for is soul retrieval. Is that right? And the dean said, yeah, that's kind of right. That's right, And so we went down, a whole group of us, Rachel Remen from the medical school and Charlie and the former CEO of Monsanto and a whole bunch of people, and were very well received by the students after a while, although it really made them question how they were living their lives and what mattered. And so those kind of questions are there for all of us. What matters, what brings happiness for us as human beings? Because if we can't be happy, what's the point? And I don't mean happiness in the superficial sense, but the happiness of connected with the human family and the family of Earth and bringing our gifts forward and the happiness of the heart. And then you see outside that beautiful statement from Benjamin Cardozo about looking toward wisdom. Wisdom ought to be a part of the life of a lawyer. And it's what I was taught in the monastery. It was like the second half of education that was missing. It was the education of the heart, really. So it's easy to make a case for the mindful lawyer, mindful lawyering. And most of you know this. There have been more than 1,000 studies on mindfulness, research studies in the last decade or two, and 1,000 school systems using trainings in social and emotional learning and mindfulness in health systems and in medicine and education and criminal justice and business and all kinds of venues, and then modern neuroscience, the fMRI studies of neuroplasticity and brain changes that happen even in just 8 or 10 weeks of meditation training, and the reduction of stress, the increase of self-regulation, the health benefits that they show scientifically: faster healing, stronger immune system, longer telomeres, so you live longer, it says, I don't know, the fostering of some inner balance and clarity, better academic achievement. But there's something more important. A young Army officer who was hot-tempered and easily got angry and overwhelmed and so forth was remanded by his senior officer to take an 8-week mindfulness and stress training, which they have in the military now, and I just keep hoping it goes up the chain of command. That's after 6 weeks, he was in the supermarket on his way home. It was evening, crowded, lots of people, got in line, lots of groceries, and the woman in line in front of him had only one item, and she was in the wrong line. He was one of those people where you're supposed to be in the right line, and things are supposed to happen in the right way, and she should have been in the express line and not in front of him. And then she was carrying a baby, and when she got up to the clerk, they started to coo over the baby, and he said, come on, there's a line here, and people are in a hurry. And then she takes the baby and hands it to the clerk to hold this little kid. And he starts to go ballistic, how insensitive, how dare her, we're all in a hurry. And he could feel his anger rising, but because he had been practicing mindfulness, he also could feel the pain of that and the contraction and all the tension of it. So he took some mindful breaths and kind of noticed it and let it recede some. And he noticed that it was actually kind of a cute kid. So when he got up to the checkout woman, he'd sort of moved through that, and he said, that was actually a kind of cute kid that you were talking about, a couple minutes ago. She said, oh, did you like him? He's my boy. You see, my husband was in the military, but he was killed in Afghanistan last year. And so now I have to work to support myself. And my mom takes care of my boy, and she brings him in once a day so I can see him. And we're so quick to judge another human being or to judge ourselves. I'd like to say some of us wouldn't be hired to be a judge in a civilized country the way we treat ourselves. And to become mindful then doesn't mean some aseptic or kind of rigid, detached observation. It actually is an invitation to come into the present moment and to see with the eyes and to see or listen with the heart and to be present with your body, to be present as a human being in this mystery of life. No matter what the work you're doing, whatever kind of law or whatever teaching or that whatever this profession at the moment is asking of you. And equally important is the question to your life as lawyers and to your own well-being is the question, what do the people that you work with want of you as a lawyer? What do they want from the justice system? And the people you serve, in some way, they want predictability, they want fairness, they want justice. But they also want to be respected. They want to be heard. They want some sense of empathy and even compassion for the conflict or the situation that they're in. At the Mindful Lawyering Conference, there were a number of judges who were present. Actually, there was one judge who talked about how he'd had a meditation practice, a sitting practice, and then when he was appointed a judge and told he would be sitting on the bench, he said, oh, sitting, I know how to do that, and he really made that connection between the sitting practice of stability and mindfulness and that role. But anyway, another judge who was working with this notion of bringing mindfulness, and mindfulness really has in its attention a quality of kindness, of care to it, to the work of the courtroom, he said, imagine if I could give this, and he does actually, this training to my juries. So here's what he says. I want you to listen to what will be presented in this courtroom with total attention. You may find it helpful to sit in a posture that embodies dignity and presence, and to stay in touch with the feeling of your breath moving in and out of your body as you listen to the evidence. Be aware of the tendency for your mind to jump to conclusions before all the evidence has been presented and final arguments made. As best as you can, try to suspend judgment and simply witness with your full being everything that's being presented in the courtroom moment by moment. If you find your attention wandering, you can always bring it back to your breathing or to what you're hearing over and over again. And when the presentation of evidence is complete, then it will be your turn to deliberate together as a jury and come to a decision, but not before. And so simple and elegant an invitation to presence, to perhaps bring those qualities of respect or listening that people are looking for in the system of justice. Now, the solutions for the system of human conflict, have been around for thousands of years. There's the history of law from Roman and Greek times in the West, and this is the Buddhist monastic code. There's lots of volumes of commentary on it, but this is the main 227 or 339 rules and how they came about, because it was a system that was one of accretion as well. Things get added to it, and what kind of misconduct happened, and then what were the council of elders and how they dealt with conflict. And this is a legal system that I've been a part of that's been going on for 2,500 years. And instead of lawyers, they have, when necessary, a council of elders that come together and listen the way that one might in a court to the different sides and procedures for the resolution of conflict. But underneath, it's based on wisdom. And wisdom of things that say, for example, hatred never ends by hatred, but by love alone is healed. This is the ancient and eternal law, no matter what circumstance you're in. This is the truth. Hatred doesn't end by hatred. Or a focus on the dignity of each person, no matter what they did. They are not defined by their actions. The actions have consequences, but there's a respect and a dignity, a seeing of the dignity and basic goodness of a human being. And you all hold a lot of conflict in your work, especially those of you who are lawyers or will be lawyers, and you hold the emotions of that conflict. You hold the aggression and fear and outrage and insecurity and bitterness and all those things that are there when people come to the law. And I remember a number of people from the Ninth Circuit who came out to Spirit Rock some years ago and asked for training in forgiveness, because they said at the level of law that we're working, the law has failed many people, and we're looking for other ways to solve these kind of conflicts. So you'll be dealing with that, and you'll be dealing with the trauma of the people. And my daughter, who was working over at the East Bay Community Law Center, connected with the Berkeley, a number of the people who were working over there in this last year, she among them, helped to bring in some experts on secondary trauma for the law students and the young lawyers there. Because when you're dealing with abused women and you're dealing with homeless people and you're dealing with the kind of trauma that comes through the door there, it's hard to hear, it's hard to let into your heart, and it's hard to know what to do with it. So yes, you're the adjudicators, or you're the support and you are the protectors of your clients in certain ways, but also you're the carriers of their spirit, whether you like it or not, and it comes into your bodies. It's not just your own, and this is from the Wall Street Journal, which is an article on medication that says that 40 million young people in this country are on prescription medication. Antidepressants, antipsychotics, ADHD medications. And I won't ask you to raise your hand, but how many people need help managing the stress in your legal life from medications? And how many people do you know, quite honestly? I mean, let's be real about this, and in the stress of our society. So in carrying these traumas, and those outer traumas, they actually, they trigger your own trauma and your own conflict that's undigested in you. So you want to have ways to reduce stress, release trauma, develop clarity and compassion. All of this confirmed by neuroscience and traditional wisdom. The essence of this is that the mind can be trained. That this doesn't happen by accident, just as you can get an intellectual training or a historical training or a training in law that gives you the layout of, you know, the great edifice of law and those who've developed it and your part in it. It's also possible to learn, to steady, to release things that you carry, to find an inner resilience and balance even in the middle of conflict. And then one more story, and then we'll start to do our practices together. I just came from a conference called Wisdom 2.0 in Silicon Valley, and there were 600 people in the room. On the wisdom team was John Kabat-Zinn and Roshi Joan Halifax and Eckhart Tolle, and myself and a few others. And on the I won't say the opposing team, but on the team that we were dancing with were the founder of eBay, Piero Midyar, one of the founders of Facebook, some of the key founders of Twitter and Google and Zynga and so forth. And a lot of them in their 20s wearing sneakers and T-shirts and worth $5 billion or whatever, you know, kind of amazing. All interested in how to use this extraordinary wired network that's happened in just the last decade or so for the possibilities of fostering wisdom and compassion worldwide. So it was very hopeful. And I asked how many people in the room had a mindfulness or yoga or meditative practice, and almost every hand went up. But there were not only 600 people in the room at the conference, there were also 250,000 people online who plugged into it, so because they have a lot of reach. It's kind of extraordinary. And one of my favorite people, there were lots of amazing presentations. The Chief Technology Officer at Cisco, this woman, Padma Shri Warrior, talked about, she said, well, I have a $32 billion budget and 20,000 engineers I supervise, and I meditate every morning because I need that clarity and balance to deal with all of them. Anyway, but was a guy named Arturo Bihar from Facebook, and he wasn't at the very top, but he was up there, and his job is relations between the company and the people who are using the service of Facebook. And one part of his job is to deal with complaints, basically. He's also the complaints department. And he said, we have 800 million users, so you can imagine how quickly we can get 1 million complaints. And think about that. I mean, think about your problems. Okay, here's 1 million complaints. And ordinarily, a corporation has policies. He said there's the tech complaints. That's easy. We send to the engineers, and they fix them. But most of the complaints are conflict between people, are interpersonal complaints. And he said, so we could send out a boilerplate policy. It's a complaint. Somebody posted a picture. I don't look good in that picture. I want that other person to take it down, you know. Or it's me and my mistress. I want that taken down right away. Or it's my kids and they're my kids and someone else shouldn't post that. He said, so we could send them the policy, you know, is it lewd and lascivious? Is it harmful? And fill out these things and we'll take it down. He said, but then I realized that they need to talk to each other. So instead, he's developing a response, he has started to do, where it says, can you please contact the person who posted it? And would you, and then he started to say, would you tell them how it affected you, including how you felt? And then since people don't know feelings, he has like the smiley face and the sad face. And he said, okay, it could be, it made me embarrassed, or it made me hurt, or I felt you betrayed, or I felt afraid, or whatever. So here's a little prompt. He said, and then tell them why you might have felt that way. And then he said you might ask them a question or two, such as, what was your intention in posting this? And often the intention is, well, I thought it was a cute picture, or I thought you'd like it, or whatever. And he said 85% of the time now, people just take the picture down once they start to communicate. He said, so I get the chance now to teach emotional intelligence and conflict resolution skills to 1 billion people, which is a really kind of extraordinary thing in that kind of training. So the mind can be trained and humanity can be trained. And then the question is, all right, how? So now we have about an hour or so to do some of these trainings, having made the case a little bit for it. And most of you are already experienced meditators, so I would ask that you listen with a beginner's mind. You may know all of this already, and some of you, quite honestly, could probably sit up here and in a very beautiful way, teach your colleagues and explain very well yourself. But in a way, it's like it's a dance. Let's just do it together, okay? So the first practice I want you to do is a standing meditation. Also, because it's nice to include your body, and I don't know how much the body is included in this law school or in any, top 10 law school, but it is your vehicle, and it's worth paying some attention to the fact that you are incarnated in this human body. So we're going to do a standing meditation, a very, very simple one. You could stand and feel your breath, the wonderful practices of mindfulness of your body, but we're going to do something else a little bit different. So let yourself stand, and then when you feel comfortable, allow your eyes to close. And first just relax and feel your body being present. And that it's good to change posture, isn't it? And to allow your body to have a moment of stretch and movement. And now the instruction for this next 30 seconds is to stand absolutely still and not make the slightest movement whatsoever with your body. Keeping your eyes closed and no movement at all for 30 seconds. On your mark. Go. Thank you. Now, I could ask for your report, but I actually know the answer already. You couldn't do it, could you? Because the reality is that we are a river. We are a living energy system of sensations and sights and sounds, and energy system of changing feelings and thoughts. And the point of meditation and mindfulness isn't to stop the river, which you can't do, but I saw a poster in a health food store in Santa Cruz in the 70s that showed this wonderful Hindu Swami with a flowing beard and standing in a little orange loincloth in the tree pose, like this, more or less, right? Except that he was balanced on a surfboard on a really big wave, and it said, you can't stop the waves, but you can learn to surf. Meditate with Swami Satchidananda. It was kind of an advertisement. And that's really the point of mindfulness and meditation, is to learn to allow the experience that you have, which is always changing, and to find your composure in it. Does that make sense? All right, so let yourself sit back down. And the first, or the next practice that we'll do, which you can do at your desk as you study or wherever you happen to be, is just to tune into your bodies. And again, most of you have practiced for a long time, but let's do it together anyway. So let your feet be flat on the floor. Allow your eyes to close gently. And begin to notice the experience of your body. The sensations, the areas of warmth or cool, of tightness or tension, of pleasure or pain, of tingling. And allow your body to be as it is. The point of mindfulness isn't to change experience, but instead to allow experience to be witnessed or held in the heart of mindfulness that says, yes, this is the way that things are just now. It's like this, the body. And feel what it's like as you sense the sensations and the vitality and the movement and the tension and the pleasure and the pain, tightness, and make space for it all. And as you do, relax and hold or touch the difficult sensations with kindness, like you were holding a fussy or crying child. Not to try and change, but just with the comfort of attention. Very simple. And relax into vastness, into space. The space of this room, the vast silence around, so that your body rests in openness and space. Become aware of the space around your body, the space of the room and the sky around the building, and the vastness within which your own life energy is held. Relax into it. Trust it. So first little step, and I forgot to bring a bell, and Charlie said, oh, no problem. I've got the Bell app. We can use that. So I wonder how it was just to come back. You meditate, most of you anyway, but just to come back and be here, first embodied, and then to feel the space that can hold, the space of awareness and openness that can hold body. How is that? That feel okay? Difficult, easy, comments, anything?
Hopeful.
Hopeful. Thank you. Calming. Someone said the question is not the future of humanity, but the presence of eternity. That there's something, we can get lost in our problems and our dilemmas and the things that we have to solve and tend to, and get so lost in them that we lose the sense of spaciousness or presence. It doesn't take very long to come back and feel that spaciousness, to allow the body to settle, to allow the mind to begin to get quiet. And feeling the body is one of the most direct avenues to do it, to bring body and mind together. So then the next step, and we'll do just a few little things and we'll take some more questions, is as you pay attention to the body, you find your attention starts to drift. And one way to help stabilize and connect body and mind is to become aware of the breath itself, that as you feel the body is breathing itself, this life breath. It's interbreathing with the trees outside and the air that comes across the Pacific Ocean and the Borneo rainforests and, and also the breath of the people around you. You're breathing their breath. And the body has a kind of wisdom and aliveness that when we begin to pay attention to it, can stabilize and bring the quality of mindfulness that's not rigid, but that's responsive, that can feel the river experience and rest in it. Eduardo Galeano, wonderful Latin poet, he says, science says the body's a machine. The church says the body's a sin. The marketplace says the body's good business. The body says, I am a fiesta. And there's something about bringing your attention back to the body and to its life that enlivens everything that you do. It brings that spirit back alive. So let's take the next step and become the witness. Mindfulness is really the witnessing awareness of the movement of the body, of its breathing. So again, when you're ready, let your eyes close gently for a few minutes. Come back to feel your feet on the floor, your body seated on the chair, and the space of awareness that holds your presence. And take 2 or 3 deep or cleansing breaths. Feel the breath come in deeply, and release what wants to let go with each breath. And now bring your attention to feel the breath rhythm wherever it's easy to notice. Coolness in the nostrils, swirling, tingling back of the throat, or the rise and fall of chest or belly. And if it's difficult to feel the breath rhythm, take your hand and put your palm on your belly. Feel your belly in the palm of your hand expand and contract, and leave your hand there for the practice. Feel the breath in the palm of your hand. And for a few minutes, just stay with awareness of the breath, how the body breathes itself, and notice what happens as you feel the in-breath and out-breath or rise and fall over and over again, and return to the breath as best you can. Stay with it. Mindfulness of breathing. This breath, this moment. Let it breathe itself. So here you are doing this very simple, and for many of you familiar, training of bringing attention into the present moment without judgment, which is mindfulness, and developing it through this most universal process of being aware of your life breath, of the body breathing. Now, what happened as you did it? What did you notice? Be helpful to hear. Tingling in your feet and body, thank you. Body sensations. What else? Sense of separation, as if consciousness were the witness and the body was a vehicle, so that mind and body as distinct became apparent, please. Thank you for the honesty, frustration, and fighting a lot of thoughts about the future. My friend Annie Lamott says, my mind is like a bad neighborhood. I try not to go there alone, right? So that's, part of why people meditate together. What else did people notice? Come on. Sleepy, anybody? You know it was there, okay? Restless or bored, anybody, a little bit? How about tension in your body? Some notice, certain ones. How about unfinished business, things that, that conversation or that thing you've got to deal with? Yeah. And so Mullah Nasruddin, who's the kind of holy fool of the Middle East, he went into the bank to cash a check one day, and they said, could you please identify yourself? And he reached in his pocket and pulled out a small mirror and said, yep, that's me all right, And meditation is really like looking in the mirror. You sit down, mind your own business, feel your breath, and then the busyness of thoughts, the sleepiness, the unfinished business of the heart, the conflicts that we're in, the pleasure that we have, the tingling of the body, the sense of calming, the relief of coming into the present, all those things show themselves in the mirror of the breath and in the quality of being present. So then the next question, which again many of you know from mindfulness practice, is how do you work with all those waves of energy, with the thoughts and the emotions and the pleasant sensations and the sense of witnessing and the sense of being caught, and expansion and contraction, or the tingling in the body or the sleepiness and so forth. How do you work with that in a wise way with mindfulness? Because as you learn to work with it, then also you'll be able to bring it into the circumstances of your work, your legal practice, or even to bring that spirit at least in the presence of the people that you work with. So one of the helpful tools to use in mindfulness practice is the practice of naming or acknowledging what's so. In the old days, if you knew the name of the dragon, you actually started to have some power over it if you knew the dragon's secret name. And so to be able, the shamans know this, so to be able to acknowledge what's present, this is tingling, this is tension, this is a sense of detachment arising, this is a whole set of thoughts, this is the unfinished business of feelings, this is sleepiness. And they're not bad, these are the energies of life. So in one monastery, instead of judging you shouldn't be sleepy, do you know why you're sleepy? Because you're tired. You've been working really hard, as law students or whatever you're doing, and you sit down quiet and your body says, hey, remember me? I'm tired. And so you bow to and you say, oh, this is what sleepiness is like. In one monastery, it's called the poor man's nirvana, right? You just say, okay, this is sleepiness. Or maybe you sit and you start to get anxious. You're worried about some case or some exam or some conflict or something like that. And so you name it and you say, oh, this is fear. And at first you get caught in it, but after a little while, after 20 or 30 or 50 times, fear, you feel it in your body, in the contraction, and you see the stories and so forth. You go, oh, fear, I know you. This is just fear. It's okay. And you relax around it, and it loses its power over you. And also you start to see its true nature with wisdom. As Mark Twain said, my life has been filled with terrible misfortunes, most of which never happened, right? And so fear has all these stories that it tells, but it's not actually what's so now. Or there's judgment. I'm not meditating right. My mind is wandering my attention, I'm not doing this well, and I've got these other problems, and you know how much self-judgment there is. Anybody have that? Julia Child's instructions in how to do this, she says, remember, if you're in the kitchen and you drop the lamb, you can just pick it up. Who's going to know, right? And it's pretty much the same in meditation. You feel the breath, the attention wanders, you judge yourself, and you say, okay, next breath, that's fine. Thank you for your opinion. That's the judging mind. If you say, I shouldn't judge, stop judging, I hate so much judgment. What's that? More judgment, right? You just say, okay, you name it, that's the judging mind. Thank you for your opinion. Now you feel a few more breaths. Or you feel pain. Because we live in a comfort culture. Pain is like a mistake. Anybody not have it? Just checking in here to see. You can have your money back, right? I know it didn't cost anything, but whatever. But to be able to sit with joy and pleasure and also to sit with discomfort is enormously liberating. And when we can bear our measure of sorrows and our physical discomfort and soften with it and find our way to be present, we can then be actually open to this world rather than frightened by it. Because otherwise you're always trying to avoid pain and have pleasure, and it's an impossible task. James Baldwin writes, I imagine one of the reasons people cling to their hate and prejudice so stubbornly is they sense that once hate is gone, they will be forced to deal with their own pain. And so when we can't deal with our measure of sorrows or loss or trauma or physical pain or whatever it is, then we project it, and it's the communists, it's the immigrants, it's the Muslims, it's, how we do that. It's somebody else, because we can't bear witness to what Oscar Wilde called the tainted glory of humanity, the beauty and the measure of beauty and the measure of sorrow that is human incarnation. And to take your seat in meditation, yes, it's a training, but in another way, it's also an invitation to something that is timeless, and it's like the work of the soul. to come back and say, who am I in the midst of all this life that's been given to me? So to be able to name this, oh, this is pain, or tingling, or tightness, or throbbing, or emotional pain. This is tears. In the Lakota, the Sioux Indians, tears were considered the most holy thing. And people who were weeping were considered to have the most powerful prayers. Would you pray for me too? And we live in a culture that doesn't know how to grieve so well. We have 1 million people coming back from Iraq and Afghanistan. 1 million, more than 1 million, who suffered just as the millions over there have. And they don't know what to do with that grief from what, not only working with vets, I can't tell you what I saw. I can't tell you what I did. I mean, it breaks your heart. And so how do we hold this as a culture? So you sit and you let your tears come, or your boredom, or your restlessness. If you can't be bored and restless, and you will be in meditation, I promise. Those of you who meditate, you know that. Otherwise, you open the refrigerator. You get up, what's to eat. Or you turn on the internet, or you do something to distract yourself, because you can't be with yourself. So be bored. If boredom comes, oh, this is boredom. I hate this. Oh, hating. But I'm sitting with it. Oh, I'm doing pretty good. Pride, And you just notice the different states that come and name them. Or maybe it's joy. I like this. This is pleasure. Oh, I want to do more of this. Oh, this is attachment, And you let yourself sit, and then you feel a few more breaths. Does this make sense to you? So you become the witness. You become kind attention, or another phrase is loving awareness. You say, oh yeah, this too is part of humanity. And mindfulness is loving awareness. You're not the thoughts or feelings. They're part of experience. What you become is the loving awareness that then can act wisely. So should we sit again using this practice? Okay? Again, put your things down and center yourself. Allow your eyes to close gently. And again, come back to this breath. Put your hand on your belly, or sense wherever you can feel the breath as the center focus of mindfulness and attention. And in the background, there'll be waves of thoughts and emotions and sounds and so forth. Let them be in the background, and feel the breath as best you can as a way to center and calm with each breath. And then after a few breaths, one of the waves will get really strong. Sensations, tingling, tightness, pain, pleasure, sleepiness, remembering, sadness, excitement, some emotion will come. And when a wave becomes strong, instead of resisting it, let go of the breath as if to bow to it, name it gently. Oh, sleepy, sleepy, or sad, sad, if sadness comes, or excitement or joy, or fear, or planning. And as you name it with this loving attention, let it rise like a wave through the body and mind, naming it gently, and let it pass away. And then rest in the space of awareness and feel a few more breaths until another big wave comes. So you begin to notice the difference between the experiences that you have and the awareness of them, that loving attention or spacious attention that says, oh, this is the judging mind, and this is sleepiness, and this is a sensation of calm or pleasure coming. Now this is, oh, I want this to last. This is a little grasping, or this is delighting in it. Maybe that's what arises. And then, oops, there's a problem. Oh, here's problem solving. There's the experiences, and then there is the witnessing, the mindful space that notices what's present. And you begin to trust that capacity to be present and to name what arises. This also is the beginning of deep trauma work as well. If you just pay attention to the trauma you carry, you'll easily get re-traumatized, the people that you work with who have a lot of trauma. But if you can resource them, if you can give them a place of some spaciousness or stability through practice in their body or images that they use, and then a little at a time begin to pay attention to that which is difficult from that space, it becomes possible to re-experience it in a corrective way, in a way that releases and allows a different capacity to come. So how did it work to name what came up? Most of you do have a practice anyway. Does that naming work? Questions, comments, anything? Please.
I felt like the concept of thoughts, thinking of thoughts as waves is really helpful to me, just like a wave would come up and I would get like underwater and caught up in the thought, and then I would notice, oh, it's a thought. And it was like a wave.
Great. Thank you. Thank you. And thoughts especially, we'll do a practice with them in a moment. But thoughts are waves, or you could say the mind secretes thoughts, like the salivary gland secretes saliva, and they just keep washing over you. There's a cartoon in the New Yorker showed a car crossing the vast Utah desert, and the roadside sign said, your own tedious thoughts next 200 miles, right? So, you sit and the thoughts come, and mostly they're reruns, they're not. It's like you're the channel, you're late at night in Motel 6, and it's stuck on the channel, and you can't change it, and it's the same old thoughts. Okay, there's a wave of thought. Thank you very much. So that's beautiful. What else you notice?
Naming the feeling made it like 100% more real, and how does it work?
Naming the feeling made it 100% more real. I felt it more, so it actually deepened the quality of presence or attention for that. Yeah, thank you very much. Lovely. Yes?
So when I do this, I find myself constantly creating scenarios in the future, not thinking about myself, thinking about other people,
Sure.
and thinking conversations they're having or events. And so I'm wondering if you have something specifically for that, because I tried this naming it stories
Yes?
to myself and determine where they go, but then I'm curious where else I imagine I would go from sharing the story. So I get drawn back into
So two suggestions for you. The first is to look for the gaps, that even though the stories arise and so forth, there'll be moments between them before the next story comes where there's a sense of space or silence, and then a new story will appear itself. Or more likely, it will be the same old story and doing a rerun with a slight change in the soap opera, but kind of the same. And to begin to notice the gaps or space either between the stories or the moment of recognition where you say, wow, here's the story again. And in that moment is a moment of awareness. You're not identified with and lost in the story. So that's one thing that's helpful. The other is that when thoughts repeat themselves a lot, and are some of these kind of repeated stories about certain themes? Or are they all different? The what? Okay, if they're all different, then you just look for the gaps and so forth. But if you notice repeated thoughts, then when you have a thought that keeps coming back, at some point you want to notice, oh, this is repeating. What is the emotion that's related to it? And drop down into your body. And if it's a future thought, feel, well, what is that in my body that I might feel? And you notice, could be a number of things, but oh, all these planning thoughts. Anxious, or a little nervous, or afraid, or, wonder. And the minute you can acknowledge, oh, a little bit afraid, the thought starts to quiet down because you're actually feeling what it's trying to solve for you and acknowledge it. Or maybe you're remembering something in the past and you notice that over and over and you realize, oh, there's some grief or some loss, or maybe there's, conflict. I wish I could resolve this, some tension. And when you let yourself feel what's under it, the thought sometimes will quiet down. Does that make sense to you? So you're starting to learn how to feel more deeply the currents underneath that produce these waves of thoughts. A couple more comments. Mm-hmm. It's a beautiful image. She said, I go to this place that's like an ocean where there's a great sense of calm and well-being, and she doesn't know whether it's just a fantasy image or there's something useful. The mind is really, it's the source of all things. It's really the source of how we act and live and respond. And it works in part through images. So if that image comes and it feels like it's a healing or healthy image, use it, and then from that place, you'll notice other energies come and go, like these waves of sadness or excitement or calming or pleasure, and let it become the place that you rest just as others are resting in their breath. It's absolutely fine. So one quick practice now, 1 minute practice, just to kind of make it really clear. I want you to sit and count your thoughts, okay? Because here we were working with our emotions and various things like that. But just to become clear that you can rest as the loving attention, as the witness of the mind rather than lost in them. So you're going to be like the cat at the mouse hole. And the thoughts, sometimes they're picture thoughts, sometimes they're word thoughts. Now the number's a thought. Don't count the number. That's called the cat chasing its tail, right? They are a thought. But instead, notice if there's a picture or word thought and number it, and just see what happens. So we'll do it for 30 or 40 seconds. So let your eyes close and sit quietly for a moment. And you're just going to wait. And then when a thought arises, you number it. And then number the next one. On your mark, get set, go ahead. Okay, so first, just numbers, given that this is Berkeley and some of you are competitive. How many thoughts did you count? 4? 7? 12? So does that mean that the person who had 12 thoughts thinks more? Or that the person who had 4 thoughts just has longer thoughts, right? And then how many of you had picture thoughts without words? Anybody? A few of you, and you know that about your mind thinks in images. How many had word thoughts with no pictures? There's usually a few. And then most of you get the audio-visual portion coming together. Some people almost get kinesthetic thoughts coming up through their body that bubble up. So first of all, you start to notice the kind of thought that your consciousness or mind produces. But then secondly, you begin to realize that it's possible to become the witness to thoughts, the kind awareness, so you don't have to believe them all. And then you can pick and choose a little, which is a really wonderful thing, because some of them don't have your best interest in mind. They don't. They scare you, or they frighten you, or they judge you. Have you noticed that? So to be able to be mindful, is actually a gateway to inner freedom. Because then you can say, oh, that's just a thought. You see it for what it is. The thought of your mother is not your mother. It's a thought about her, and you know how that goes, right? You have those thoughts, but it's not, or the thought about your lover or your partner or whatever. And you begin to realize that you can live more in the reality of experience than in the thoughts about it. And it makes for presence and resilience and awareness and spaciousness that you can use in your work in all kinds of ways. Now, the way to do it, 2 more little practices, and we'll take some questions. One of the things that's really helpful is to take a wisdom pause. And that means that you find yourself caught up in the school, in work, in lawyering, in whatever you're doing. And this is really a good practice. The wisdom pause is half a minute. It's 30 seconds where even if you're with someone or you're doing something, you say, excuse me for a moment. And you just stop and feel 1 or 2 or 3 breaths. Get a sense that there's space, there's a vastness around the whole problem that you have. You know that saying from the Ojibwe that everyone repeats, sometimes I go about pitying myself when all the while I'm being carried by great winds across the sky. And you stop for a moment and you feel the space and the vastness. If you put a spoon of salt in a cup, the water tastes salty. But if you put that spoon of salt into the lake, the water's still clear and pure. The moment of a wisdom pause, you go, let me just get some space. And then the second part of that pause is to ask yourself, now in this circumstance, what's my best intention? Because I know that, for example, if I'm in a conflict with somebody that I love or I'm close to, should that ever possibly happen to me, and there we are in the middle of it, that if I take a pause before I answer, with that energy of defending myself and being right, and you know that energy, and take a breath and take the wisdom pause, and then say, well, what's my highest intention? My highest intention isn't to be right, My highest intention is actually to connect or to solve it or to love this person or to find some way we can be together in harmony. And especially you are, in these circumstances where you can't control the outcome. You can't, And so what you have to rely on and concentrate on is the value and the integrity and the truth and the rightness of your intention, of the work that you do, and hope that it brings a good outcome. And sometimes it will, sometimes it won't. But that's really what your heart needs. So to take wisdom breaks, wisdom pauses periodically through the day is a really beautiful practice. And then it helps you find your composure. When you find your composure in the midst of change, that's wisdom. You become more gracious or loving or easy. And, things are always changing. Intellectual property law, whole new things happening, right? Immigration law, all these new things happening. There was a cartoon in the San Francisco Chronicle. It showed this family crossing the Sahara Desert on camels. Father, first big camel with all his carpets. Mother, slightly smaller camel. 3 kids on their little camels. The last kid is talking to Dad and saying whatever she's saying. And the father turns back and says, stop asking if we're almost there yet. We're nomads, for crying out loud, right? And that's the nature of human life, that we actually are in a river of change. It's the nature of law. It's the nature of human relations to one another. It's the inner nature, as you discovered as we sat, and as you know, the river of thoughts, the river of feelings, the river of sensations. To become mindful is to find your composure, your flexibility, your centeredness in the midst of this river. Now, last practice, and then a little time for questions, is the practice of compassion. As you start to become mindful, you see, quite honestly, that you have your own measure. It's called the 10,000 joys and the 10,000 sorrows. You have your own measure of sorrows and your own measure of joy and beauty, and no one is exempt. And then the people that you work with carry that. It's part of human incarnation, or it's part of the curriculum, if you believe this to be a place where the heart learns, or the veil of soul making, as it's been called by the poets. I mean, what matters really for you or the people you care about or the earth is to grow in love and connectedness and understanding, to bring forth something beautiful. And to do it, you need compassion, because everybody has a measure of suffering, yourself included. And it's so natural if you take the wisdom pause, or if you train, and there are all these beautiful practices of forgiveness and compassion. We'll do a little bit of one in a minute. But I was teaching with Pema Chodron in Masonic Auditorium a few years ago, and it was a lot of people. It was like 2,000 or 3,000 people, an evening on compassion. And at one point, a young woman stood up, and she said that her partner had just committed suicide. It was not many days, and it was so pained and raw, and suicide's very complicated emotionally, because there's the grief, but also there's the guilt. Could I have done something else? And the anger, how could you have done this? And all these different complex emotions. And Pema just said, can you take a breath and hold all of this in compassion? Yourself especially. And then I could feel how alone she was. She felt really alone in it. So I asked, how many people in this room have experienced the suicide of someone in your family or someone really close to you? Maybe 200 people stood up, 8% or something like that. And then I said, would you please look at her? And would you, young woman, you please look around in the eyes of these other people? And, if any of you have been part of the restorative justice movement, it was much the same, that kind of moment. It was really a holy moment, because everybody was in it together saying, yes, this is sometimes what we have to bear as human beings, and we're here with you. And everybody could feel it. It is so natural to us. From the Associated Press, when the earthquake hit Haiti, all these donations poured into the American Red Cross, and the most notable was a gift that came, $14.64, from the pockets of homeless people in a downtown Baltimore shelter, with the simple note that said, we're worried about our brothers and sisters in Haiti. I mean, it is who we are when we take a pause, when we look in another human being's eyes, when we come back to our own breath and body and heart. And we can train in this. There are practices of loving kindness and compassion, and I invite you to come to Spirit Rock, or even better, go to the East Bay Meditation Center, which is the single most diverse meditation community that I know on the planet. It's quite phenomenal in downtown Oakland, and it's just beautiful teachings. Or just to go online or get the various books. I have a book called The Art of Forgiveness and Loving Kindness, or a book called Lamp in the Darkness, Meditations for Difficult Times, with a CD in it. And there's forgiveness practice and loving kindness and compassion practices. And they're beautiful reminders of what you already know. Because forgiveness, like the Ninth Circuit was looking for, doesn't mean you condone what happened in the past. You may say, never again. I will do everything I can to protect people. And it's not papering it over or hardening your heart in some way. A man wrote to the IRS last year, I haven't been able to sleep knowing that I cheated on my 2009 taxes. Since I failed to fully disclose my earnings on my return, I've enclosed a check for, cashier's check, mind you, for $2,000. If I still can't sleep, I'll send the rest. I mean, and you know how we are as human beings. And forgiveness is the same process. It's a little, you grieve, you weep, and then finally at some point you realize you don't want to harden your heart. You don't want to put anybody out of your heart, or as somebody says, you give up all hope for a better past. All right, I'm carrying this inside, and they're having a vacation in Hawaii. Who's suffering? So you let go and you say, all right, that they did what they did. You bring in compassion for yourself, for everyone who suffered, and then you start again, because to become mindful is also to know that it's never too late to start again, ever. That it's never, in every moment you are born anew. Every moment is a new birth. Every breakfast is a new incarnation. And what will you do with this beautiful day? What do you really want to bring to this world? So close your eyes, our last little practice. 3 minutes, 5 minutes, and then a few questions and we'll be done. Bring yourself back to breath and body very gently. And while we could do forgiveness practice for yourself or others, loving kindness practice, these are all complementary practices of wisdom. Let's do the compassion practice. So first I'd like you to think of someone you care about a lot, that you love and who's dear to your heart. And picture them. Remember them. See what they look like. Very simple. And as you see them there in your mind's eye, remember them and feel your care for them. You could do a loving kindness practice, you could do a blessing practice, but in this case, the practice of compassion is to become aware of the measure of sorrows that they carry, as each human being does. To become aware of the suffering in their life, the struggles that they may not have even told a human being. And as you see them and let yourself tune into the pain or struggles of their life, their difficulties, then quite naturally the heart opens to compassion, and you can recite these very simple phrases or something like that, whatever speaks true for you. May you be held in compassion. And may your pain and suffering be eased. And may you find peace in your heart. May you be held in compassion, all your struggles. May your pains or sorrows be eased. May you be at peace. And then imagine this person that you love looking back at you and seeing your struggles, your sufferings, your pain, and wishing the same for you as you can wish for yourself. May my own struggles be held in compassion. May my pain, sorrows, difficulties be eased. May I too find a peace of heart and well-being. May I be at peace. And feel the capacity for compassion, mercy, forgiveness for yourself and others that's innate in you. The wisdom of the heart. And as you breathe gently, hold yourself and those you care about. And you could bring in all kinds of other people until it was the whole world. held in mercy and compassion, all beings. And so this is just the beginning of these very simple and beautiful trainings of metta, loving kindness, or compassion, or forgiveness. And they're written about in all kinds of wonderful ways in books. Sharon Salzberg, John Kabat-Zinn, Stephen Levine, myself. And you can get meditations online. They're trainings of the heart, and they work. The beautiful thing, modern science shows that they're really effective in changing the whole structure of the nervous system as we do it. I guess the last thing I want to say, and we'll take a few questions then after that to end, is that with compassion and presence, there opens the possibility of joy, not the joy of running from the world, but the joy of beauty in the midst of it, the laughter of the Dalai Lama, who has all the sorrows and struggles of Tibet on his shoulders. And people don't go to hear him just talk about the problems. They go to hear him laugh because he's so joyful. Or Mahagosananda, my teacher from Cambodia, who led these peace walks through the war zones for 15 years and was nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize a whole bunch of times and so forth. And he said, if you can't be happy and joyful, what's the purpose of these practices? So we also tend to be loyal to our suffering. You know what I mean? And the invitation of mindfulness and even of compassion practice is to know it, to hold it with mercy, tenderness, and then to say, this is not the whole story. Pablo Neruda, the poet, in one line, he says, you can pick all the flowers, but you can't stop the spring. And you worry for the world, and yet there's something greater and more beautiful that's happening, and you are a part of it. A friend of mine who's been sneaking into Syria and working in mediation in the conflict there, brought that poem into the activists in Syria, for the Arab Spring. You can pick all the flowers, but you can't stop the spring. And there's something that wants to be renewed in us as humans, and to have the wisdom pause, to have the capacity to be mindful, to train yourself in balance and compassion and forgiveness. You become the carrier of that, and that beauty for those you work with and those you care about. So we'll stop with that and take just maybe 5 minutes of questions and then let you go out and to the spring evening. Please.
I'd like to pass the microphone around for questions, and so we'll have that recorded on our
Okay, that's
thing
great.
too. And I want to invite everybody to ask questions about the practices we've done today, and also about the way these practices interface with the challenges we confront in our lives as lawyers and law students and others.
Yeah, we can go a little longer if you want, and then people who have to leave, that's fine, as people have.
For me, the mindfulness is kind of like a first step towards empathy, connection, and compassion, and maybe restorative justice and a restorative kind of a process. But the existing legal system is a competitive, sort of a gladiatorial approach. And so you're taking mindfulness into that arena. And it can be maybe like the samurai who's more mindful and grounded as they slice the head off their competitor. And so how do you kind of deal with that?
You're worried about the misuse of it in some way.
Yeah, and
so I have a friend who
the system itself, the
I have
overall
a friend
system.
who is developing MFIT, which is mindfulness, mental fitness training for the Marines, pre-deployment. And people raise the same kind of question. Here are these soldiers going, you use the image of the soldiers, and they're going to be more mindful. Will it be a more mindful sniper? Is it going to be misused? And I said, not at all. It's the opposite. If you meet these people who are going over there, they're 18 and 19 years old, and they come from Iowa and Arizona and, Texas and wherever, and they've never seen anybody with a rag on their head, or, they've never been out of their part of the country, and you've got an automatic weapon in their hand. I want these kids to have some emotional self-regulation, some centeredness, because they're in danger and they put other people in danger. And the same way, the thing is that there's a stealth thing to this, that if you become mindful, you actually start to pay attention. As you said, it's a gateway to resonance, empathy, and compassion. It can't not work that way because you're paying attention. So go, baby. I think it actually works. Thank you for the question.
I'm just passing the mic on.
And the gladiators need to take a breath, I'll tell you, they do. And it would help them.
I actually thought your question was the opposite. I don't know, maybe I misunderstood. But I was thinking that if you take mindfulness and compassion and peace into this adversarial system, then your head might get chopped off, not that you would chop the other. I mean, basically, the other people are there to take advantage of, of any opening that they see.
If I were a martial artist, because you brought in the image of the samurai and so forth, I would actually want to be still and centered. There is a capacity in being present that's different than having all the alarm systems on, that's actually more effective. This is from William Butler Yeats. He writes, "We can make our minds so like still water that beings gather around us that they may see their own images and so live for a moment with a clearer, perhaps even a fiercer life because of our quiet." And when you're centered and present, that is an amazing power that you have. And it gives you a power to respond rather than react. And I'll tell you, in a certain way, it's fearsome. It's something kind of beautiful. There's a warrior quality to it. So don't underestimate it. But you then have a choice rather than, the conditioned reactivity. And you can calm a whole situation from that centeredness, even if somebody's being really wild. And I saw it with Gosananda in Cambodia. So
I'm curious what you hope to see from the emerging symbiosis of science and meditative introspection. So far, the neuroscience that has emerged seems mired in proving that introspection is effective. And once it has proven that to a satisfaction, what's next?
That's a fabulous question, and I don't know. I think it's really a new generation and new world. I could feel it at that Wisdom 2.0 conference, that there are people who are designing meditation apps for people, and pretty soon they're really thinking about meditation implants and stuff like. There's all kinds of tuning brain waves and using sound and so forth. It's your generation's to do. And I don't know, but I can feel that there's all kinds of possibilities in this newly wired world. Just as I said, here's Arturo Bihar saying, I might be able to teach, conflict resolution skills to 1 billion people. And that's just the start, so. Please.
I'm reading on the subject you raised about the opposition is not mindful, you're talking that off. I'm reading Ron Chernoff's biography of George Washington. And it's really unique because it gets into his personality, not just what he did. And the amazing thing about him was his stillness in battle. He would ride into a battle, he'd be perfectly erect and perfectly still, and the bullets flying around him, and he never got hit. And he inspired his soldiers in the midst of absolute chaos and death. And so I really relate that to what you're saying.
Beautiful. Zen Master Thich Nhat Hanh describes that same quality that you say. He said, when the crowded Vietnamese refugee boats met with storms or pirates, if everyone panicked, all would be lost. But if even one person on the boat, like this George Washington that you're describing, remained centered and calm, it was enough. It showed the way for everyone else on board to survive. So So it's a very powerful thing you're describing. Thank you. In the back, please.
My question, I'm a law student, and one of the things that I really struggle with here is I came into law school having a more, I'd say, abundant practice of mindfulness and doing yoga and all that stuff, and I'm a second year, and I lost a lot of that and kind of am reacquainting myself with it. But there's so much pressure constantly at the school to be thinking about the future, and I get frustrated with my peers and also with the counselors and the career department and student services and all of that in terms of pushing us so hard to think about the future. And I just would love to get your thoughts about sort of when and how it's productive to think about the future when you're in a position when the economy is terrible and there aren't great opportunities out there and people are suffering and you want to help and you want to change the world and you want to think about things, but obsessively worrying and becoming too immersed in this sort of very fast-paced world of law school is, I'd say, unhealthy is an understatement. But I struggle with that a lot, and I worry that if I'm too much in the present, then my third year is going to come and it's going to be May and I'm going to have no plan. But if I try to plan out my life right now, I'm doing myself a disservice.
There is your question is so important, both for the law students, because I know that it's really there, and especially with the terrible job market and all of those things, the pressure of law school, which is intense anyway, multiplied by that. There is, as I listen to your question, what the Dalai Lama calls a middle path, all right? One extreme is I'm not going to think about it, I'm just put it aside, and that's a little bit like the ostrich and not terribly helpful. The other extreme is to worry a lot. And you can feel what that does to your body and your psyche. It's not particularly helpful. So what mindfulness invites you to do is to notice those two extremes, because this is fear-based, and say, all right, here's the fear about it, and they want to engender fear, some people around, and that's not how I want to operate. I want to be that person on the boat that's calm. I want to plan, so I'll give myself time every week. I'll set aside some planning time so I can apply to things or imagine things. I'll give myself, and then when I'm not doing that, I'm not going to obsess and think about it. I'll do due diligence for that in an appropriate way. And then because you have a mindfulness practice, when it comes out of that time, once in a while there'll be some great inspiration. You make a little note, say, okay, yeah, I'll do that. But mostly it's going to be reruns. And you say, thank you, but we do that on Friday from 3 to 6, and we work on that, and I'm tending to that. So, and in a way, what you're starting to do is teach yourself skills of balance that's neither denial on one hand nor obsession on the other, and it's liberating to the heart. And this is then, I'll end with this instruction from the Buddha. He says, live in joy, in love, even among those who hate. So you're talking about the conflict stuff. Don't take it into yourself. Live in joy and health, even among the afflicted. Live in joy and peace, even among the troubled and the worried. Look within, quiet the mind and the heart, free from fears and grasping, know the sweet joy of living in the way. And so you're really talking about, just as you're getting this outward training that's world-class education, there's an inner training of how to be mindful and use your inner resources so that you're attentive and present, that you do what's necessary, but that also you don't overwhelm yourself. And, you're in the middle of the fire, the battle, you're in the middle of this. This is the perfect place to develop that. It's really important. Not only for you, but of course, those of you who are on the faculty or who graduated or who are all in the legal profession in all kinds of ways. These are really your gifts. This is in some way your birthright as Buddhas that you are, your own Buddha nature, to come back to that even in a culture that's forgotten it. It's possible. And it's a beautiful thing. So thank you.
Thank you, Jack. That's a beautiful note for us to end on. A reminder of what we can accomplish and the leverage of lawyers and the legal process moving in a direction of mindfulness. and what an impact that can have on the way the society thinks of itself and is structured and interacts. Thanks so very much, Jack.
Thank you for the
teaching.
bell, Charlie. And everything. Thank you all. It's really a pleasure.